The Alvarez family had lived in their quiet suburban home for nearly a decade without any problems, until the summer when everything began to change. It started subtly at first, faint noises at night, a creak here, a tap there, sounds that Daniel Alvarez brushed off as the settling of the old beams. But soon, the noises became more distinct, measured steps that moved deliberately across the roof after midnight. At first, Daniel convinced his wife Maria that it was raccoons or stray cats. Their teenage son Chris disagreed, saying it sounded too heavy, too purposeful. Their 8-year-old daughter Emily didn't argue, she simply crawled into bed with them each night, trembling, whispering about the man on the roof. One humid July evening, Daniel decided to prove once and for all that it was nothing. He stayed awake after midnight, sitting in the living room with the lights off, armed with nothing but a flashlight. At exactly 12:47 a.m., it began again. Thud. Then another, deliberate, like someone pacing slowly back and forth. He flicked on the flashlight, rushed outside, and shined it upward. The roof was empty, the shingles glinting faintly in the moonlight. He climbed the ladder, heart pounding, and scanned the roof with the beam. Nothing. Yet as he stood there in the silence, he felt a vibration beneath his feet, as if the steps were happening right under him, inside the house. He bolted back down, shaken but unwilling to admit it. When Maria asked what he saw, he only muttered, "Nothing. Just the wind." But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Over the next week, the footsteps grew louder. Chris recorded them on his phone, and when he played the audio back, there was something worse than the pounding. A faint, rasping voice whispering through the static, "Emily." Terrified, the family began sleeping in the living room together, as if proximity could protect them. But each night, the footsteps returned, heavier, angrier, circling the roof as though hunting. Emily began waking up screaming, claiming she saw a shadowy figure crouching by her window. Maria clutched her rosary and prayed louder each night, but even her prayers seemed to make the noises intensify, as if mocking her faith. By the second week, none of them could deny it. Something was on their roof, and it wanted them to know it was there. One night, Chris insisted on confronting it with his father. Armed with a baseball bat and a hammer, they climbed the roof while Maria stayed below with Emily. The night was still, the street quiet, no sound except their ragged breathing. For a moment, it seemed empty again. Then, from the far end of the roof, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching them, though nothing was visible. Chris gripped the bat, knuckles white. Daniel raised the hammer, heart hammering in his chest. Slowly, a shape began to form out of the darkness. At first, it was like heat rising from asphalt, shimmering, distorted. Then it solidified. A tall, thin figure with limbs too long, its head cocked unnaturally to one side. Its eyes were nothing but empty sockets, its mouth a gaping void. It took one deliberate step closer, and the roof groaned beneath it. Chris swung the bat wildly, but it passed through the figure like smoke. Yet the sound, the thud, remained. Daniel shouted for them to get down, but before they could move, the figure opened its mouth. From it came not a roar, but the sound of dozens of footsteps, pounding, surrounding them. The shingles vibrated as if an army were stomping across the roof. Terrified, they scrambled back to the ladder, rushing inside. The house shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. Maria clutched Emily to her chest, sobbing prayers. When Daniel locked the door behind them, the sound stopped abruptly. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. But when Emily lifted her head, her tiny voice cracked. "Daddy," he said my name. The family tried to leave the next day, but their car wouldn't start. Every time Daniel turned the key, the engine coughed and died. The mechanic they called never showed up. Even stranger, their neighbors claimed not to hear anything at night, even though the Alvarezes swore the footsteps shook the entire block. It was as though the nightmare belonged only to them. Trapped, they boarded up Emily's windows and slept in shifts. Still, the pounding grew more violent. Sometimes it sounded like claws scraping across the roof. Other times, like something heavy dropping, rolling. One dawn, Chris discovered deep gouges in the shingles, as though something had tried to claw its way inside. That evening, Daniel heard the voice himself for the first time. As he tucked Emily into her makeshift bed in the living room, the air chilled, and from the ceiling came the hiss, "Emily," his blood ran cold. He held her close, swearing he'd protect her, but in his heart he feared he had no power against whatever haunted their home. The single set of footsteps pounded above them, louder now, deliberate, each thud echoing through their bones. The Alvarez family froze, staring upward as though the shingles were transparent. Chris gripped the bat so hard it felt like it might snap in his hands. Daniel bent to grab his phone, but the screen was shattered, the light gone for good. The moon slipped behind a thick blanket of clouds, plunging the roof into a near pitch-black gloom. Maria whispered another prayer, her rosary beads rattling in her trembling hands. Emily clung to her mother, shivering, whispering over and over, "Don't let it in. Don't let it in." Suddenly, the sound changed. Instead of pacing, the footsteps began stomping, violent, erratic, shaking the old beams. Dust rained down, the roof vibrating like it might give way. Daniel's heart seized. "It's trying to break through." The thuds grew stronger, accompanied by sharp scraping from beneath, inside the house. Something was moving through the attic, clawing at the wooden boards from below. A jagged crack split through the shingles beneath Chris's feet, making him stumble back. He swore he felt cold air rising through it, as though something was breathing on him from inside the roof. Daniel shouted, "We can't stay up here. We have to get off, now." "But the ladder," Maria began, her voice cracking. "We'll jump if we have to." Daniel snapped, more desperate than confident. He scanned the edges, searching for the lowest point. The roof groaned under their weight. Somewhere behind them, the broken voice whispered again. "Emily," Emily screamed, her tiny hands covering her ears, but the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder, almost taunting, circling them in the darkness. Chris shouted into the void, his voice trembling. "Shut up. Leave us alone." He swung the bat into the night, but only silence followed, before another hiss, wet and guttural, rose right behind him. The creature darted past, just a blur in the corner of their vision. The roof creaked violently under its weight as it rushed around them. Maria stumbled, nearly losing her footing, but Daniel grabbed her arm just in time. Then, a new sound pierced the chaos, the front door slamming open downstairs. The family froze. Something had entered the house. From below came a horrible scraping, like furniture being dragged across the floor. Then, a laugh, a deep, broken cackle that echoed up through the walls. The thing wasn't just on the roof anymore. It was inside. Maria's voice broke, barely more than a whisper. "It's everywhere." Daniel's mind raced. If it could move freely, the roof wasn't a trap, it was a hunting ground. He looked toward the edge. The drop to the ground was steep, but survivable if they aimed for the grass. "We're jumping," he said firmly. Chris swallowed hard. "If we break a leg, it's better than dying up here," Daniel cut him off. He guided Maria and Emily toward the lowest slope. Just as they reached the edge, the footsteps rushed at them, pounding with impossible speed. The sound was so close it was like someone sprinting right behind them. Daniel spun, raising his broken phone for any scrap of light. In that brief shimmer of moonlight, he saw it again. The figure crouched just feet away, its limbs sprawled grotesquely across the roof. Its head twitched violently, jaw hanging, eyes like gaping holes. And it was smiling, or at least, the twisted shape of its face mimicked one. Daniel shoved Maria and Emily toward the edge. "Jump. Now." Maria hesitated, clutching Emily tight. The creature lunged, its hands stretching out longer than any human's, claws scraping across the shingles with sparks. Chris roared, swinging the bat with all his strength, connecting with its arm. The crack was sickening, but instead of breaking, the limb twisted backward at an impossible angle. The creature shrieked, a piercing sound that rattled their skulls, then swung the twisted arm at Chris, knocking him sideways. "Chris!" Maria screamed. He slid toward the edge, just barely catching himself. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing his son's arm, pulling him back with all his strength. The bat clattered off the roof, tumbling into the yard below. The creature hissed, crawling closer, faster, its jaw snapping open and shut like a rusted hinge. Daniel shoved Chris toward Maria. "Go. I'll hold it off." But Maria refused to move. Tears streaked her face as she clung to Emily. "Not without you." The footsteps around them became deafening, a chorus of invisible things pounding the roof. The house shook as if it were alive, every beam and board groaning under the weight of whatever was trying to claw its way in. The creature lunged again, its shadow blotting out the moonlight. Daniel raised the hammer, swinging with desperation. The metal connected with its face, tearing a gash through its paper-like skin. Beneath it writhed something black and crawling, like thousands of insects spilling out of a hole. The thing recoiled, shrieking, but didn't fall. It only grew angrier, its body twisting and expanding, limbs stretching unnaturally. Maria's screams mixed with Emily's sobs. Chris, regaining his footing, grabbed his father's arm. "We can't fight it. We have to jump." Daniel glanced at the edge, then at the thing advancing again. His chest tightened. He knew Chris was right. They couldn't win this fight. "On three," Daniel said hoarsely, gripping his son's arm and Maria's hand. 1, 2, the creature lunged forward with a roar just as Daniel screamed, 3. The family hurled themselves off the roof into the darkness below. The air tore past them as they fell, the ground rushing up faster than they could brace for. Daniel hit first, rolling hard on his shoulder, pain detonating through his bones. Chris landed beside him with a grunt, clutching his ribs. Maria cradled Emily in her arms as they struck the damp grass, the girl's sobs muffled against her chest. For a split second, silence followed, broken only by their panicked breathing. Then the sound returned. The footsteps. They weren't just on the roof anymore. They were all around the house, circling in the darkness, pounding against the walls, racing across the shingles. The entire house seemed alive with movement, hundreds of invisible things running, stomping, dragging their claws. Maria gasped, staring at the windows. Shapes moved inside, flickering against the dim light from the street lamp. Pale faces pressed against the glass, each one twisted in that same grotesque grin they had seen above. Emily screamed, pointing. "They're in the house." Daniel forced himself to stand, clutching his throbbing shoulder. "Run," he shouted, dragging his family toward the road. Their legs pumped against the damp earth, the grass slick with dew, but the footsteps followed. Some on the roof, some behind them, some so close it felt like the ground itself vibrated with pursuit. Chris stumbled, nearly collapsing, but Daniel yanked him up. "Don't stop." They burst onto the gravel road, shoes crunching, lungs burning. For a moment, Daniel thought they might make it to the neighbor's house, a mile away. But then the sound shifted. The pounding grew faster, heavier, converging ahead of them. Something was waiting. A tall figure emerged from the shadows of the trees, its outline human but impossibly elongated, arms dangling nearly to the ground. Its head twitched as though straining under an invisible weight. When the clouds broke and moonlight hit its face, Daniel felt his stomach turn. It wasn't a face at all, just stretched, translucent skin, eyes bulging beneath like trapped insects pressing outward. Maria shrieked, clutching Emily tighter. Chris froze in place, his body rigid with terror. Daniel grabbed a rock from the roadside and hurled it, his hand trembling. The stone smacked the creature's chest, but it didn't flinch. Instead, it tilted its head, emitting a laugh, low at first, then rising into a chorus of voices, as though 100 mouths spoke through one body. Suddenly, every window in their house shattered behind them. Glass rained onto the yard as dozens of shapes poured out, limbs bending wrong, faces peeling, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. They scrambled on all fours like spiders, their footsteps blending into a deafening roar. Daniel's mind raced. They couldn't outrun this. Not all of them. His eyes darted to the ditch by the road, where a rusted storm drain gaped open, half hidden by weeds. There, he shouted. Hide. Maria hesitated, her face pale. We'll get trapped, it's our only chance. With no time to argue, Daniel shoved Chris toward the drain. He and Maria crouched low, pulling Emily through the opening. The cold, wet concrete scraped their skin as they crawled inside, the stench of rust and stagnant water thick in their noses. Daniel squeezed in last, covering the entrance with broken branches and leaves just as the footsteps swarmed past above. In the suffocating dark, Emily's sobs echoed off the damp walls. Maria pressed a hand over her daughter's mouth, whispering shaky prayers. Chris shivered, clutching his side, whispering, "They know we're here." Daniel's heart pounded so loud he was sure the creatures could hear it. Outside, the footsteps circled the drain, slower now, deliberate. Something scraped against the metal bars, dragging nails across it with a screech that pierced their ears. Then came the whisper, soft and chilling, slithering through the grate. Dan, IEL, his blood turned to ice. It knew his name. The family huddled tighter, breath held, as shadows passed overhead. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, slowly, the footsteps began to fade, moving back toward the house, until only the night insects and the faint rustle of trees remained. No one spoke. No one moved. Hours passed in silence until the faint glow of dawn crept into the drain. Finally, Daniel dared to crawl out, his limbs stiff, body aching. The morning air was heavy and damp, but the roof was silent. The house stood still, its windows shattered, its walls scarred, but empty. Maria climbed out next, clutching Emily. Chris followed, his face pale, eyes bloodshot. They stood together in the road, staring at the house that had once been their home. Daniel whispered, almost to himself, "It's over." But even as he said it, a sound carried faintly through the morning mist, the steady, deliberate thud of footsteps, pacing on the roof once more. Maria's hand found his. "We can't stay here." Daniel nodded, throat tight. They turned and began walking down the road, away from the house, away from the sound. But the rhythm of those steps followed them in their minds, a reminder that some things never stop, no matter how far you run. And behind them, in the broken windows of their home, dozens of pale faces watched them leave, smiling.